Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the wasmCloud community meeting for Wednesday, March 13th. This is the last community call before actually WasmIO is going to start tomorrow in Spain somewhere. I'm forgetting for some reason, Barcelona, I think. And then KubeCon NA is going to be kicking off next week, starting with WASM Day on Tuesday, and then the rest of the conference from there. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. We'll talk about conferences at the end, and I'll pull up links and stuff, hopefully that I can find on the fly. The real thing that I wanted to talk about and celebrate today is we just cut a an alpha version of wasmCloud 1.0. You can actually go see that in the wasmCloud repository under releases. It is marked appropriately as a pre-release under 1.0. And you can see, I actually was looking at this release notes and it seems a little less than the amount of PRs that we put in, but I'm not totally sure. But I just want to give a huge thanks to Roman, to Victor. Am I allowed to thank myself, to all of us for putting in a huge amount of work into this alpha. And then I also want to thank Julian or JT117, Kim or Rimby, and somehow Dan is making his first contribution in this release to wasmCloud, which is surprising. But huge congratulations to the and thank you to the new contributors in this release. What a release to come in on. Um, and I want to talk about a few things about this release because you may be asking yourself, 1.0, what's all this work been alpha? And so I think it's important to kind of hash out a couple of these things. So in order to get to this point from wasmCloud 82 to 1.0, um, there were there was a certain level of significant changes that had to happen to wasmCloud in order for us to get all the things in for or make all of the changes. We actually decided to work off of a feature branch for the last, I think, 2 or 3 weeks. You may have seen me or other people refer to feat WRPC, and that is because we were essentially working off of this feature branch. We made a huge number of PRs and changes across myself, Victor, Taylor, and Roman to this one branch. I mean, it ended up being 95 commits with this is not an inflated number. Like it's not like we change package lock.json or something. We really wrote a bunch of code. And doing a little bit of retrospect on that, I don't think that we'll do that again. It was something that essentially came out of necessity when it comes to the changes that we had to make for WRPC. We're essentially swapping out the RPC or remote procedure call layer out from underneath wasmCloud. And so in order for that to work and for us to change the structures on the control interface to get the right information, it really was just a lot easier for us to be able to piecemeal implement part of this feature bit by bit and then combine it at the end into one big feature. So, of course, as we are approaching 1.0, there's not going to be any changes like this where we massively change a huge part of the project. TM, hopefully. But that is essentially the reason why we went with this feature branch for this. We merged it 2 days ago, which was all this code had been reviewed and tested and fit into our existing integration tests, which we had modified, things like that. Now, all the work for 1.0 is just proceeding off of main as normal. So folks should feel free. I know I've done a couple of call outs over the last, I believe in the last community call to say, hey, by the way, we're refactoring and changing a good bit of the core host section of the code. So if you're looking to contribute, maybe take a pause. You should be good to go now. So I wanted to talk a little bit about if you look in this PR, I tried to lay out a couple of the big things that changed. The whole theme of going from wasmCloud RPC to WRPC is we were getting rid of some of the wasmCloud specific things that we had hanging on after we moved to component support, and moving it so that the RPC framework that wasmCloud uses really just feels like, instead of having two components communicate over the lattice using an in the middle, like kind of specific protocol that had a lot of baggage from the previous way we did things with wasmCloud, it is now very much on the component native side. It feels like if you were to take two components together and compose them, link an input, or sorry, an import to an export, you now are essentially just running those two components in wasmCloud. You can link the the import to the export just like you would be composing them, but they can run distributed across the lattice and communicate. Now, I have demoed that in a previous community call, so I'll hold on that for today. But just a general look at this, if you've been using wasmCloud for a while, we use something called contracts like wasmCloud HTTP server or wasmCloud SQL DB. And these were things that we created and then supported with our capability providers. With WRPC, what we are using instead are WIT worlds or WIT interfaces. And same thing for operations on contracts, we're using WIT interface functions. There's not a huge difference here in terms of what you would see from developing a component, but the important thing is that we are now, for the standard interfaces, like for key value and for blob store, for example, two things that are proposed as wasmCloud interfaces. We are actually approaching, we're doing RPC with the standard interfaces instead of a custom contract that we built just for wasmCloud. Now, there's a little bit of nuance there around how we're supporting resources on the provider side, but I might save that for like a more in-depth blog post. The important thing is that from the component side, you're still just using the standard interfaces. Instead of providers running on link names anymore, which is something that we encourage folks to do in order to have the same logical provider use different configuration, we now actually just have providers, they can run normally, and the link name is actually a property of the link. Similarly, where we used to have bidirectional links where you would link an actor to a provider, we now have a unidirectional or one direction link where you link one component either to another component or to a provider. And that is based very specifically on the WIT interface that you're calling. So when you have an HTTP server provider and a wasmCloud component that uses WASI HTTP incoming handler, you link from the provider to the component on WASI HTTP incoming handler. I'm realizing that maybe some of this would be good with a visual representation, so I'll work on those kind of things too. We're changing quite a bit around the underlying RPC, though none of that really is something that you need to worry about on the component side. Everything works the same. We are, again, with the RPC, transmitting, invoking WIT functions over the lattice natively, which is really nice. And we are, another primary change is replacing what we essentially used call aliases for, or what we were using the in-key signing key for when it comes to routing. We are essentially having you supply a component ID or the tooling that you're using supply a component ID when you start a component or a capability provider. Additionally, we have full support for custom WIT interfaces that uses all of the data types that WIT support. Now, I say data types very specifically because we don't have support for over-the-wire futures, streams, and resources at this time. But again, that's something that we want to supplement with a blog post as well for how you can use components or WASI-virt to adapt to actually allow you to use these things. There's a bunch of features that also landed in there. We closed a bunch of things, but it's probably, I'll just send this as something in the chat for supplemental information if folks want to read on. So now that the alpha release is out, I want to talk a little bit about what this means. I guess I don't have to share for the whole thing. So the reason why we are putting out an alpha release for wasmCloud 1.0 is because there is still a good need to update Wash, our wasmCloud shell, and Wadum, our application deployment manager, to work with wasmCloud 1.0. Like I mentioned, we have different RPC protocols, the control interface structures changed. All of these are essentially internal changes to the protocol on which these projects communicate with wasmCloud. But we actually have to cut an alpha release so that we can test with a released version of wasmCloud. So that is part of it. Now, the reason why it's an alpha is because there are still some things that may change between now and 1.0. Now, it's nothing major. There aren't any other big features that are going in before 1.0. There aren't any. There are very few planned possible breaking changes between now and 1.0. One of them just being updating our capability providers to fully use the new method of getting configuration for links. So there may be some rough edges there, maybe some APIs that we want to smooth over and make a better experience before we actually call it a release candidate. But just to give you an idea of what the future looks like here, we have the alpha cut now. We're going to be updating our capability providers through the end of the week, in addition to Wash and Wadum. And then depending on how all of that goes, either the end of this week or some point next week is the goal to cut a 1.0 release candidate. Now, when we move from alpha to release candidate, that's essentially asking for folks to come on to test it, to upgrade if they have custom capability providers, give them an upgrade with the provider SDK. If you have components in an application you were running before, give them an update, try to run them in 1.0 and let us know if there's any changes. And then the hope there, the idea is that with a release candidate or 2 or 3 that we cut, we give ourselves kind of some breathing room to fix some bugs, find some edge cases, improve error handling and logging, things like that. But for all intents and purposes, where we are now is effectively feature complete for 1.0. And the only thing between alpha and release candidate is making sure that we have all of our command line tools and APIs and things updated, and there's nothing glaring that we've missed. So we still want to give ourselves some space to make those changes. Obviously, wasmCloud is going 1.0 for the first time and only time. So please let us know if you folks have thoughts on the methodology here. We are just kind of, we're trying to pick things that are as descriptive as possible for the phase that the project is in. But we're really, really excited for you all to try it out and to get this over the line. A lot of work and a lot of changes went into getting 1.0 to work. We've been running tons of tests on it in order for us to have confidence in the release, and it's all working pretty well. Okay, I spieled for longer than I meant to. Do folks have any questions on the project progress so far? Alrighty. Well, I didn't want to totally leave folks hanging, so I will do a short demo of just some of the new things that landed in 1.0. I don't have a full end-to-end one prepped because the alpha release kind of cut a little bit before the community call. I wanted to prepare full providers and everything. I could run an integration test if that would really excite folks who are looking on. But I will probably just opt to show a few things and spur some discussion. So a couple of these things were features that I had worked on, which I was pretty excited about. Finally getting into Wash and wasmCloud. You can see right now I'm working on updating Wash to WRPC now. But I want to call out some of the small and some of the cool things that we added in this release. So in the next release of Wash, which will be coming out, it'll probably be targeting wasmCloud 1.0 Alpha 1 or maybe Alpha 2 if we have any bugs that we fix. We now have support for building capability providers, which with Wash Build. I know that we essentially had this on the back burner for a long time. I was personally of the opinion that we should probably hold off on this because capability providers are native binaries, and inherently with the whole system that we have of you can build binaries for different architectures and then combine them into an archive, that brings in a lot of edge cases. Now, I still hold the same opinion that Wash shouldn't be responsible for cross-compiling things. But for folks who are building their own capability providers and testing them locally, you can now define a wasmCloud.toml for a provider, and build it using Wash. So what this does is this builds the provider locally and creates the provider archive for you. So if I run Wash build in the KB Redis folder where I created where are you, wasmCloud.toml, all I have is some, I should zoom in a little. I have some metadata here around the name of the provider, saying that it's written in Rust. And then since we're working in a workspace, this might be relevant to you folks who have many different things in an application. You can change the target path where the provider is going to be and what the binary name is, for example. You can run wash build and build your provider archive, which is super nice. We've needed that feature for a long time. And I don't know why, but it finally bugged us enough to add it within this release. So now you can wash build your components or your providers. A key point is that we removed the build option for, or the help text and everything for interfaces, because now WitBindgen is actually the project that we use in order to build interfaces and generate code. So we don't even need it anymore, which is great. So now we can create a provider archive. Other things that we added. So this version of Wash that I'm running with is essentially just an installed version locally of this branch. In WashUp, we have it prepared to launch a wasmCloud 1.0, the 1.0 release candidate. So we look at help. Oh, that's not how command line things work. Neither is that. Correct. We can see that that is actually launching 1.0. So for the folks who are running things, there's really not going to be that much difference at the command line level, which is really nice. So I'm running wasmCloud now. I can run wash get hosts, and we can see that I'm running one host here, wash get inventory, all the same things that you know and love, but now you're running the new version of wasmCloud. Yay. So no actors or providers are running at this time. Now, we do have a pretty cool new experience that you can do. So if you have an actor, or if you have a component like the HTTP Hello World component, this one is taking in an HTTP request and will respond with hello from Rust. Now, I don't know how many of you have used wash call before, but this essentially used to be a very, what's the right word? Very ornery command line interface. When you wash call, you would call a running component based on its public key, and you would have to supply the operation name, which would be like HTTP server.handle request, and then you would have to supply exactly the correct JSON blob that operation expects. It's really hard to diagnose deserialization errors. You would put in a list as a map and it would fail, all kinds of things like that. Now, washcall did arguably get descoped for this release, but it is a super useful version of the command line parameter, and the purpose is just to call a simple function on a component that's running in a host. So right now, invoking something like HTTP server, the handler is more complex than we can handle with wash call. What we can do is use a simple function. It's very similar to wasmCLI run, and I'll show you how to do it. So if you have your HTTP server or your Hello World component, what you can do is inside of the WIT world, you can define an interface, something like easy call. and we can create a function in that interface, which I think is this, that takes no parameters and returns a string. Very simple. When we run wash build here, that's actually not going to do anything. But what you can do is export this interface easy call. And so now your component is going to be expected to have an export for this function that takes nothing and returns a string. So when I try to build it, it'll say, hey, I expected you to implement this export. So let's do it. If you add the export here, you're going to use the namespace and package from the top of the wit, which here is just referred to as package. And we'll use the interface easy call. And we'll say that my component, which is this HTTP server component, is going to implement it. Now, if I save that, it actually would give me better suggestions if I was working directly in this component. Because it's not part of the workspace. Let me do this real quick. Rather give you the full IDE experience, right? It says, hey, I expected you to implement this trait guest for easy call. So we can do that here, just like we did for HTTP server. We can implement wasmCloud hello easy call guest for HTTP server. Nice try, Copilot, but not quite. We get this call function where we can just return, we kind of generate it with a wit bindgen. When I say we, I mean wit bindgen generates it with a string, but you can just return a regular string, and we can say something like, hello from my component. Nope, there. So we've now implemented this function. Sorry, I saw the chat. Oh, is it frozen? Does it work now? Here, let me do this. That look better? Okay, cool. Maybe it was just an artifact of sharing the whole screen. So apologies for that. So I don't know where it cut off, but all I did was I added this interface easy call in my wit, and then I exported it. This will work. It doesn't need to be called call. All it needs to be is a function that takes no parameters and returns a string. And then in my Rust code, I added this little function called, or this implementation called call, and it'll say hello from my, we can make it, fun and dandy, hello from my component. So if we wash build this, we will build that component. And then what we can do is run, since we already have a host running, wash start component, file, and here. And then we have to give it a component ID now, which we are considering making this something that Wash provides on its own. But for fun, we can just call it hello. And then what we can do, as long as that actually started, we can see that the component is running with a component ID hello, HTTP hello world. We can run wash call with the component hello, which is just the ID that we gave it. We can call wasmCloud hello. It's too compressed here. There we go. wasmCloud hello, easycall.call. We get hello from my component. Look at that. So what this is essentially, it's very similar to like a wasmtime run, but we are just interested in giving folks more tools at the wash level to just invoke components easily. Now, I can very much see us implementing this also for HTTP server and probably messaging, because those are going to be the most common entry points for a component. And then you don't need to have like you don't need to implement this in order to work with call. But this is just a little bit of a look on how wash call is going to be better. I would also love, instead of invoking a running component, to be able to point it to like a component that's running on disk, spin up wasmCloud, run the component, call the function, close it down, all those kinds of things. So it's a little sneak peek of the difference in the developer experience there for just calling a function on a component. Some of the biggest changes in this version of wasmCloud came in this version of Wash came with the link put function. So like I said, these interfaces or these links are going to be between a source and a target, and they're going to be very specific to a WIT function. So what you will now do is put a link from a source to a target based on the component ID you supply when you start it. And then you'll be able to specify your WIT namespace, your WIT package, and then any interfaces there. Now, of course, this is going to work the same in WADM as it always has, where you can define all of that in a declarative manifest. So what I'd really like, I am would I definitely plan on socializing it as soon as we get a Wash alpha version out the door so that folks can test with it. But I really like to get WADM out the door as well so that people can see, how this relationship of two different components is all defined in a declarative manifest and then actually watch it work from there. So that's a little bit of a sneak preview of just showing, well, one, that wasmCloud, the Alpha 1.0 is working very similarly to the way it was before. The important bit, the huge feature add, the huge feature change that we had in this version of wasmCloud is the RPC layer. And people who have already been writing components for 0.82 shouldn't need to change them at all, actually, in order to run in this version of wasmCloud. So we're super excited. Tons of things internally we're breaking, but for folks who were writing components, not much changes. For folks who are writing providers, there are going to be a good couple of changes, but a lot of them are encapsulated inside of the actual provider SDK that we provide. So even though some of the APIs change there, there's really not that much code to change. So please feel free to reach out if you have a custom provider that you're looking to update. All right, folks. That is that was a little bit of what I wanted to show for the 1.0. I don't have enough. I don't have a version of Wash or Wadum to give folks today, so I don't think I'm gonna call for a broad test. But if you want to cargo install Wash from my branch, I will tell you how and what to do with it. I'm always happy to have somebody take a look at that too. Okay, pausing again. Folks have questions? Sweet. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. So, as you know, we're presenting next week in Paris, and we wrote an actor in the actor pattern basically last November for downsampling data. And so we're in this world like where we want to be presenting what's coming or what's new, but also it's a little bit tricky now to adopt it because Wash is not available, as you said, right? So, what's the best strategy to I mean, in the next few days to present relatively modern things, but also not break a lot of things that we already have running, right? We can't spend too much time on fixing and experimenting things. So what's the best strategy?
Yeah. So just quick question. The actor that you wrote for downsampling, is your interface written in Smithy or is it written in Wit already?
It's Smithy, yeah.
Okay. Uh, in that case, because the conference is next week, I do want to thank you for wanting to show off the latest and greatest stuff. I would recommend just still running a wasmCloud 0.82, kind of the same configuration that you're working with. If only to give you maybe a little more confidence and to help me sleep at night if you're running the demo on stage. Now, it's not that it wouldn't work. We have all the pieces in Alpha to for you to migrate. You have a custom capability provider too, right? You're working with a Nats
Right,
key
and that
value.
uses WIT, right? That uses WIT. Definitely. So
Yeah,
we're running it or trying to run it on 82.
yeah, yeah. So that will still okay. And that provider, is it a custom provider or are you implementing the key value interface?
It's the key value interface.
Okay. Then yeah, in that case, I would say to use 0.82. Only only because it, it's it's similar to getting the wasmCloud 1.0 alpha out. It's not that you couldn't functionally update to WIT, like modeling from a Smithy to WIT interface is pretty similar. There's not off the top of my head, there's nothing in Smithy that you can't I want to say represent that works. Represent in WIT. Um, but as you said, the ability to kind of define your manifest to lay out your application and then use Watom to actually run it is really nice. And we may or may not have that by next Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And at the very least, you would need a new version of Wash, which we may or may not have essentially by the end of the week, which would mean changing things, during your conference time for the demo.
during the demo.
Yeah, could be fun. Could be fun.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Um,
Thanks. We'll stick with the older way of doing things as much as we can. So yeah.
I was going to add, if you wanted to add a slide about the sort of coming changes, we can work with you on that. If you sort of want to mention, because I know the provider is already one step right in the WIT side, and so you kind of have a little bit of the new stuff already with what you have working right now. But yeah, if you're excited by that, I mean, obviously we're excited by it. So yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. I want to present at least show a slide what it would look like or what the new kind of terminology would be. And obviously, if we can get the Nets key value provider running, which is crucial, then I would love to. We're gonna show that, right? And that has WIT in there. So yeah, we can work on a slide together. That's good. And one question of the I saw that the configuration went in there, kind of reading the configuration, which was one of the things that we wanted to show off as kind of the things, but that we can't use, right? Because we can't use 1.0. We can't use that currently. So it would be just basically showing it on a slide then. And there will be kind of a talk, I guess. So I'll step back. A lot of people raising hands here.
yeah, it's a great question. I've gotten some really good engagement in my past talks too. And one of the last slides that I always like to throw in is like what's next, or like, yeah, we showed you this, but like where are we really going with this? Are there any places where it could be implemented better? I feel like that's a perfect place to highlight that. Um, and you can put my face up on the slide and say this guy didn't get it done in time, so I couldn't do it. Uh,
Works
let's see,
for
I had
man.
one more
You
thing.
should you and everyone else that's been grinding away at this should be very proud, and you shouldn't beat yourself up. I know you're being funny. But it's incredible the amount of changes. The one comment I just wanted to jump in on was the language, and we are very deliberately trying to simplify the language as much as possible. So everywhere, it's just dropping to just WebAssembly components because that's what they are. So we just want to keep it simple and just emphasize that deliberately now, wasmCloud has fully adopted WIT and the component model standard, and we're completely interchangeable, that everything is compatible with those standards. And, since we're the first to adopt and demonstrate that a little over about a year ago when Bailey showed that off in QCon, we plan to continue to track the early versions of Wasm Time and continue to adopt and pioneer those as they get across the line. So I know there's still some documentation changes to land there, and Eric's on the call. I know he's just hacking away at those as quick as he can to get the documentation up to date to reflect the 1.0 as well.
Yeah, I wanted to mention one more thing too, because I don't know if it explicitly came up but when we're moving to 1.0 and things are changing in a significant way, I wanted to be clear that we're still planning on supporting a pre 1.0 version of the wasmCloud host for at least the next 3 months. I think we've spitballed about the next 3 to 6 months. So if folks are running things on 0.82, especially if your actor is based with Smithy or is code generated with Smithy, aka it's probably using WasmBus RPC, or you have a custom capability provider that hasn't been migrated yet. We're not just dropping 0.82. So we'll plan to support with at least security and bug fixes, like patch fixes of that version of wasmCloud for the next 3 to 6 months. And that includes the associated tooling like Wash, which is meant to interact with that version, and Watum. I don't foresee any, well, nobody foresees security updates. There's nothing that we knew that we needed to update to this point, but I just wanted to give folks confidence that I know we kind of did a general broad call to action. Now is a good time to migrate to components. But yeah, you still definitely have time. If no, we can help get that stuff over the line or kind of migrate it over. Please let us know. I know that we've generally been considering a migration guide from Smithy to WIT. So if folks would find that helpful, please ping me in Slack or send me a message. It would be great to know so we can prioritize that.
Yeah, and we're acknowledging that it's cutting edge, right? So we're jumping to components as quickly as we then can when it's out there and stable, and we're pretty excited about that. And our talk is more about how can we integrate wasmCloud and WebAssembly in an architecture for IIoT. So it's more from not in the technical detail, and there are plenty of other people who can talk better about that in going down into wasmCloud, but we're kind of how can we use the technology, right? More our focus.
One thing I wanted to note, you mentioned the config reading off the essentially reading off the local disk for config issue. That feels like something we could actually solve rather quickly if you have a provider that's working right now, but the only sort of, well, one of the only outstanding issues is that you're having the credentials come over the link. Right now, I think we can definitely fix that in less than a day, right? Or well before the time you demo it. So if you'd like to, I mean, if we can get access to that repo and collaborate on that, we can definitely at least get rid of that, because it's not too hard to read from the disk, with a provider. So
yeah, okay, thanks. I'll reach out.
Yeah, great question. Thank you for checking in. I know that I am really excited to see your demo and stuff that you put together. Okay, folks I don't even remember how we started this. I'm just gonna move on to the next part, and then I'll pause for questions at some other point in the future. Wanted to get to the next two sections in the community call. I'm going to skip around a little bit. I want to do our roadmap check-in really quick because I think that will be fast. So looking at the wasmCloud roadmap, Victor and I are still working diligently to get the last little bits of the MVP for WRPC across the line. If you take a look at this, actual ticket, you can see that two of the big things, which arguably don't really belong as sub-bullets in this issue, but we can approach that later, is updating Watum and Wash to use the new control interface APIs. Both of these things are technically implemented now. I have a branch in Wadham that uses the new stuff, and a branch, thank you, Apple, in Wash, or sorry, it's in wasmCloud, but for Wash that uses the new stuff. That's how I was able to do the demo today. But I'm gonna keep them unmarked until they merge, and then hopefully we can cut a release from that. We've got some internal actual optimizations that we want to do when it comes to WRPC transport. And then I think one of the last things is around, well, this is refactoring. This little bullet is around making sure that we have trace context propagated through the entire wasmCloud system, specifically when it starts and or ends with a provider. This is something that we have implemented in wasmCloud already. We are passing this stuff along through the host when components are invoked. So the important thing is just to make sure that it's making it all the way through. If you send an HTTP request, that provider starts the trace context so you can get the full distributed trace in internal tests. So as you can see that these functions or the leftover to-dos in here are really just around providing tests, internal refactors, etc., around the WRPC feature. So we're doing great on feature implementation. We've got two little chores here. This one could arguably even be pushed past the 1.0 milestone if we need it. It's just small, so it feels like why not? And then probably one of the last things that we will do it before the release candidate is pinning our WIT definitions and versioning our WITs at 1.0 to match the milestone. So we're doing really, really great here on the 1.0 milestone. I could see us actually completing all the work here that's up here, that's up here on the board very quickly. It doesn't, unfortunately, as all roadmaps end up being, it's not 100% complete with the work that needs to be done. Like the work to track Wadham and Wash is done a little separately, but all of this stuff should be moved over very soon. And as we're looking through that or getting that done, we are really, really close to the 1.0 milestone. So just look forward to actually getting these tools and the host in y'all's hands to test, because that will give me, and I'm sure inspire the other maintainers to have the confidence that ready to call, what we've put together a 1.0 and support it for a little while. So it's pretty cool. Folks have questions on the roadmap? You know what? We have a different roadmap. I think it would be cool to show this. So did this last year, Q3, Q4, we had a little roadmap that's on the wasmCloud documentation. And then for this year, we have the Q1 roadmap, which is all about getting 1.0 out the door. We are doing really, really well on our goals. I want to call out that we have essentially migrated all of the pieces that I can think of off the top of my head that make a component something that you eventually have to turn it into a wasmCloud actor that runs in wasmCloud, and you have to build in assumptions that you're running in wasmCloud. We have essentially gotten rid of all of those pieces such that you can take a WebAssembly component that's built and uses standard interfaces like WASI 0.2 or the wasmCloud and WASI runtime interfaces that we're choosing. And you can just run it in wasmCloud, take advantage of our providers, take advantage of the distributed RPC. It's really cool. So this building without vendor lock-in, platform-specific dependencies, we are crushing. We are now fully onto defining our interfaces with WIT for components, for providers, even for some things in the host. And we are also doing a really great job on our goal for leveraging cloud native standards wherever possible. Still using OAM, OCI, cloud events for our manifests and how we distribute our artifacts and everything like that. Worth noting, in the 1.0 alpha is the first version that will launch with open telemetry, metrics, logging, and tracing support all in one. So if you run wasmCloud with the -- enable observability flag, we'll export metrics logging or logs and traces to an OTel collector, which is really awesome to see. It'll slot right into your cloud native stuff. And if we take a look at the this very professional diagram that we put together when we were putting out this roadmap, it might actually be really small on the call, and I can't. Ooh, wait a second. Nice. So if we take a look at stabilization of APIs, we have completely revamped the topics of our control interface in a really easy to understand topic structure. Again, this is internal to the tools. You would only need to do this or interact with the control interface manually if you're building on top of our APIs and things, but that is in a great place for us to maintain it for wasmCloud 1.0 or for 1.0 and going forward. Same thing with NATS RPC communicating over WRPC, which is great. Our cloud events are set. Our environment variables and command line flags are namespaced and stable. Our policy service and our configuration service. Our policy service, actually, if you missed the last community call, has now been the structure changed a little bit, but we have a working example with open policy agent. So that was really cool to show as an example of a policy server to add on more security to wasmCloud. All of our regular WIT definitions, this was written before WASI-P2 launched, but they are pinned to 0.2. We support, and we went above and beyond on this goal. Instead of wasmTime 16, we're on wasmCloud or wasmTime 18. So we're crushing this goal, defaulting to components for all of our documentation. We tackled the very hard problem of supporting multiple different versions of a single component in a lattice, how to properly work with that with links and the way that things work in wasmCloud today. A lot of that went into the WRPC feature. So that is a little bit of a look behind the scenes, but it took a couple weeks of design discussion, to actually design around that. Distributed WIT support comes out of the box. As I said, OTel is working great. We did descope secret support for components for past 1.0. But that's something that we have a path forward on with the new configuration method that we have for components and providers. So that's something that we're looking at doing as soon as we can find out the right abstraction to do it in a pluggable way as a follow-up to 1.0. So I am glad I remembered this because it is fun to go back and look at a roadmap and see that we have crushed our goals, implemented a ton of the features that we wanted, and anything that we're pushing to past 1.0, again, doesn't mean that it's not going to get done. The real name of the game was making sure that we had a stable base for building on the future versions of wasmCloud. We've done really, really well in the past, taking what we have and not breaking it going forward. As I mentioned a few calls ago, you could take the Echo wasmCloud actor that we made in, what was it, August of 2020 and run it in the wasmCloud 0.82 version. So we're pretty good at keeping stable APIs for a long time. Okay, now I can get off of the pat myself on the back train. We're running out of time in the community call, so I'm just going to keep moving forward. So please raise your hand or stop me if you have a question. I wanted to discuss one thing that we're working on just generally in our documentation and tools. We're doing this in a backwards compatible way, but we are going to be slowly renaming instances where we have actor to either component or wasmCloud component or WebAssembly component. You may remember, I will probably fail to find it if I click on random community calls. We have talked about this before, where we have specifically noted that an actor is, or wasmCloud actor is a special thing because you need to sign it in order to run in wasmCloud. It uses wasmCloud interfaces, so it's not just an off-the-shelf WebAssembly module. But that's not the case anymore. We actually do support people taking WebAssembly components and taking them. When I say metaphorically off the shelf, I just mean mostly like you could work your way through a wasmTime example and then take that component and run it in wasmCloud because we have the same stable base of interfaces. And we see a lot of confusion in the community around that notion. So they have you have a WebAssembly component, and the big question is, what do I need to do to turn it into an actor so that I can run it in wasmCloud? And because we don't have an actor SDK that we're going to make people use, there really isn't anything you need to do. So in general, as we go through our help texts and documentation and some of our command line calls, we're going to be doing this rename from actor to component where it makes sense. We're just going to start calling them components because that's all they really are. I think that's all there really is to be said there. For the changes that I made in that realm to wash, for example, you might have seen me earlier in the call do wash start component. We're using aliases, so if you run wash start actor, it's going to work all the same. No difference there. But that's just something that if you're reading along and you're looking for actor, we're going to phase that language out because we're really not doing anything special in we're not doing anything special that's like opinionated actor model. We're running WebAssembly components. So just trying to be more descriptive and accurate with our words there. Any questions on the roadmap or the actor component stuff? Am I sharing right now?
Brooks,
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
you're not sharing.
Okay.
You're doing great. But I just so we're not saying actor at all. That's the idea. We're going back. We're photoshopping all the pictures, scrubbing the histories. Okay. All right. Got it. No more.
Yep. That is the way. We already started playing with this language in our documentation. You probably see it in a lot of places. Actor component is what we've kind of compromised on. But we're just going component. There's nothing about the components you run in wasmCloud that need to be special or have a special word to them.
And then eventually we're going to get rid of the word provider and say host. What's the host functions or something?
What the wasmTime host plugins that they're using is a host component is what they're using. So yeah, we'll cross that naming bridge when we come to it, but loosely something like WASI component or stateful component or something that specifically designates them as special is down the line. Provider component, I'm cool with that.
Maybe. Let's get it in the RFC.
Yeah.
All right.
Put it in stone before we know.
Right.
It just caused endless confusion, Colin. Like it was just endless confusion. We had people we had that question come up from like 5 people asked us in a row, how do I take a WebAssembly component and then convert it? And we're like, well, you don't have to. So
yeah,
we just murder it, just make it all simple, easy, smaller pictures, smaller words, less words. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, well, there's actually. Yeah. And fewer. I was what was that, Brooks?
Nope.
Oh
I was trying to shorten it.
Streamed?
Nope, not that part. Moving on from that, type that one out a little bit too quickly. I need to find the man, I'm just as red as the XKCD presentation. I need to find the KubeCon NA schedule and the WASM.io schedule. Let me pull these up. I Actually, Caroline has done an awesome job of pulling this up. Nice. Darn, kind of. I wanted to pull up um, the actual schedules for, thank you, the actual schedules for wasm.io and for KubeCon NA. I don't know if not NA, KubeCon
mean
EU.
EU.
Yes,
So
thank you.
we've just published a blog actually on the Cosmonic blog, which summarizes all of our talks and where we're going to be and all that kind of thing. So maybe we can drop that in.
Amazing. Yes. I will shamelessly piggyback off of this.
I'm not going to lie, there are a few little nits that I need to change because I missed a couple of little typos.
That's all right. We're not even gonna look at those. So at wasm.io, looks like Taylor's going to be doing a talk for Mind the Gap between the WASM future and the present. This one will be fun. I don't know when it is. It's going to be from 2:40 to 3:10 European time on Thursday, which is tomorrow. Wow. And then Bailey, Daniel, Oscar, and Saul are going to be leading the panel for WASM Warriors Conquering Real World Applications in Production, Real World Problems in Production, which would be really cool to see. So if any folks are going to be in Barcelona for wasm.io, please make sure to check these out. We will also be in Paris for Cloud Native WASM Day and the actual KubeCon conference. So if folks are going to be there, please swing by. A lot of us will be at the Cosmonic booth or the wasmCloud project booth. But we have a talk from Bailey, which is not just a talk, it is the keynote at WASM Day for Components, WebAssembly's Docker moment. We have choosing customability. Wow, words are hard. Choosing customizability and distributing dependencies with WASM components, which is with Taylor at WASM Day. One of our great friends and collaborators from Orange, Jan Cardone, is going to be doing a talk on edge evolution, which is how they use WebAssembly and wasmCloud. So look out for that one. And hey, look at that. Looks like we just talked about this demo. We're going to be talking about WebAssembly on the factory floor, efficient and secure processing of high velocity machine data from machine metrics, which is going to be really, really awesome. I can't wait for that. We have a variety of talks across the co-located events, a talk at ArgoCon, a talk at Observability Day. Victor, you're doing a talk at Backstage Con, which I'm really excited about. I haven't seen any of the behind the scenes stuff for that yet. I have a super small talk at it's just what we do for CNCF projects to give a project update. There's no demos allowed, which makes me very sad. So I will just be slide presenting for about 6 minutes. That'll be a quick one. And if folks are looking to get involved with WebAssembly, maybe for the first time from a cloud native lens, I am going to be leading a workshop alongside or myself and Michael Yuan from Second State, who is the company behind Wasm Edge, the other CNCF runtime for WebAssembly, or the other Wasm Edge is a runtime for WebAssembly. We're going to be doing a workshop on cloud native WASM and how to use it. So general overview things, but if folks are looking to get involved, from the lens of cloud native, that's a great place to do it. There are a lot of things that we're doing over the next two conferences. So really excited for that. I see I've gone over time, so apologies for talking your ear off today. But just a general note that next Wednesday for wasmCloud Wednesday is likely to be pretty light, probably myself and a few other people, whoever I can wrangle to wave from the wasmCloud booth. And then we'll be back on our regularly scheduled stuff the week after. Okay, folks, thanks for sticking around. I'm gonna go ahead and end the stream unless people have something that's pressing, just so that we can kind of cut it off. All right.